Welcome to a Spiritual World podcast, a space where we explore the vastness within and around us, a place to remember that you are a spiritual world within a spiritual world, the mind within the mind of the all. Here, we journey beyond programming, past the pain, and into the true essence of our sovereignty. My name is Toriea, and my sole mission is for you to find the guru within and remember yourself as the creatrix of your world, embodying the power within you to build a life you love. As always, you're encouraged to go back to episode 1 for the full disclaimers on the terminology of mystic psychology. I am not a medical professional, and nothing shared in this podcast is intended to replace professional medical or mental health care. The term mystic psychology is not used in a clinical or medical context and has no connection to the medical field or industry. It is a spiritual and energetic framework rooted in the ancient wisdom and sciences of Hermeticism, intended to support self-exploration and inner awakening. If you are seeking medical advice, diagnoses, or treatment, please consult a licensed medical or mental health professional. Everything shared here is based on my own personal lived experiences and energetic perspectives, offered in the spirit of empowerment and remembrance. Please take what you need and leave the rest. I am honored to walk beside you as a channel, a guide, and a fellow traveler as we continue on this path together. Welcome back to a Spiritual World podcast, a space where healing is honored, truth is sacred, and your soul is always invited to expand. I'm your host, Toriea, and I'm so grateful you're here for today's episode because we're stepping into a conversation that feels like a weaving of 3 powerful streams of wisdom that have been integral in my own journey: Hermetic philosophy, the Mantis frequency, and the Seth Material. Each of these has touched myself and all of humanity in profound ways. Hermetics gave me a deep understanding, a language of principles to work with reality. And the Mantis frequency, well, they remind us that we are not walking this journey alone, and that we are never alone or a part of everything. They hold the architecture for us to remember. And the Seth Material, channeled through Jane Roberts, pours through timeless reminders that we create our own reality. And we are, as I like to call myself, a creatrix, creating through the matrix to lift the veil and unveil sovereign truth and origin. So what happens when we bring them all together? What happens when Hermetic principles, the Mantis frequency, and the Seth teachings start speaking to one another? That's the conversation that we're having today. And my hope is that this episode doesn't just inform you, it activates something deep within you. So, let's begin with Seth. Who or what is Seth or the Seth Material for those that may not be super familiar with this energy, personality essence that he calls his current existence? Jane Roberts began channeling Seth back in the 1960s, long before words like manifestation or quantum field were trending on social media. She and her partner, Robert Butts, documented these sessions over decades, and the result is one of the most influential channeled collections of the modern age, jam-packed with plethoras of information expanding our thought formations, which is really quite limited in comparison to what all Seth contributes and indicates through his own existence and connection to Jane Roberts. At the heart of all of it, Seth's message is simply revolutionary, simple as well as revolutionary, which is what we as humans on this path are turning more towards and even striving for: to live simply, to manifest simply, to not have to perform or coerce or manipulate reality or others to bend to our will. Because really, when does that ever work for anyone in any way at any time? And to be quite honest, look where it's gotten us so far, because we can see the state of the world around us, right? Like, we know that manipulation, coercion, trying to bend reality to our will doesn't work. We're taking a higher path now. That's what we're here for. So, Seth stands by and admits the knowledge that you create your own reality, that probable realities do exist. All the infinite branches of every choice you could ever make, expanding outward in infinite directions, pulsating through various existences, too vast, too currently to understand. And that time is simultaneous. Past, present, and future exist together, accessible through consciousness. I like to visualize it as a spiral outstretched, kind of maybe like a slinky is what, kind of reminds me of. And you have the bottom being the beginning and the top being the so-called ending, which is really just transformation. So really not the end. However, you definitely get my gist, I'm sure. Now, take that outstretched spiral and bring it down on itself into one. So even the slinky ends up condensing all of its coils into just one coil. And that is my own visual representation of how time is simultaneously existing and is non-linear, and everything is happening all at once, which is also why the inner child and inner adolescence and all the inner layers and various layers of us are important in addressing when we are ascending. Our age is a numerical representation of each of our individual's current capacity for expansion, and they are not necessarily to be compared to others. It's for our own documentary evidence, maybe, like, is a good way to put it, right? Like, we have our own encyclopedia of ourself, and it's like kind of booked out in ages. So, and moving on, perhaps to the most important, Seth's bread and butter, or center scope of the majority of what he speaks on, is self-responsibility. Every thought, belief, and emotion is part of your creative power. We come here forgetting only to eventually bring us back to remembering. And we're extremely lucky at this time period because we have a large majority of, I almost want to say masses, having the opportunity to remember. In the centuries before us, it was very minute, very small numbers. Now we have this pivotal, transformational time that we are entering into. And this can be a really hard pill to swallow for some, myself in being, because given traumas and the lives that we have lived, I know it was at least very uncomfortable for me to realize, like, holy crap, I created my own reality all along. And however, embracing it, which took me a while to do, I'm not gonna lie, really only ended up freeing me. It hasn't erased everything that happened, and I don't necessarily expect it to. However, it has allowed me to expand beyond it and find consistent growth in its knowledge, its wisdom, and its understanding. And it's only fitting, of course, that I had some really, they would have been disruptive dreams of my past, in the throes of trauma, in the throes of violence, and just a lot of really awful things. And, I woke up with the very vivid dreams on my mind and being like, it feels like so long ago. It feels like centuries ago almost. And I had the choice, right? I had the choice to say, like, oh, I was so stupid back then, or da 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 da. You know what I mean? Like, the ways that those memories made me feel. However, I looked at myself and I was like, I wasn't. I was surviving. I was doing what kept me safe at the time. And it doesn't matter how anybody looked at me. It was a matter that I survived it to get to where I am today.
And, I was able to choose that. And I was able to choose that that's not my life today. Right. And I could have brought that back to my forefront. I could have made that my life again today, could have relived it, re-victimized myself, all of those things. But instead, I'm like, please, my life is nothing like that. And this is the life that matters. This time, this moment, this here, this now. So, self-responsibility. Gosh, this journey feels so good and so bad sometimes, but so good because with the bad is the good. So, keep in mind that self-responsibility and his prevalence of it wasn't and isn't about guilt or blame. Seth never said, "You're at fault for what you've created." He said, "You are powerful. You are never at the mercy of the external world. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are an artist of reality." And I'd like to personally add in that you are alchemy and the alchemist. Think about how groundbreaking all of this information was being channeled back in the 1960s. The world as we know it was only just beginning to explore consciousness beyond the surface. And that's not even giving good credit to like Gnosticism and all of the other things that we have no idea in existence. We have such little because a lot of it, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of conspiracy theories that it's being hidden and da 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 da, but it will emerge, and it's starting to emerge more and more. And the 1960s is definitely like that vivid cusp of cresting over, like really like activational points, at least in my opinion. So, because here was Seth, right, coming through Jane Roberts, telling people the world is not solid. It is responsive. It bends to your thought, your vibration, and your focus. That seed planted itself deep into our collective consciousness to grow and nourish and bring us to where we are today. Now, I wasn't born in the 1960s. My mom was born in the 1960s. And I can tell you that since finding my own healing journey, she is finding hers as well. And I think it's really like this visual that I have in my head of how amazing it is that people that were born or coming from that era have started seeking, right? Like, and they gave birth to me, you know what I mean? Somebody from 1960s could be listening to this, and kudos if you are, like, love to hear from you. And yeah, love to hear from anybody, in all honesty. Love feedback. I always throw that out there. But like, man, my mom was born in the 1960s. That was probably an activational point. It was then, my journey, and then her and I are both now on the journey. And so it was just this scope like that I got to see really quickly, this outside scope of how that activated all of these generations that are still living today. So before I dive into how Hermetics parallels Seth's teachings, I want to pause on something important, and it's something I failed to touch on in previous episodes. However, I want to go ahead and get it out of the way, and it's super simple, nothing crazy. And I figured I'd fit this awkwardly in, or maybe not so awkwardly in, because I feel it should go somewhere, so why not here, right? You'll often hear people talk about the laws of the universe, which is really kind of what I'm getting to, the 7 Hermetic laws. And that's very common language, and I'm not disposing of it in a sense. I'm trying to figure out the right word. Like, I prefer to call them principles is what I want to get to. I prefer to call them the Hermetic principles, and that's also a language for them, and it's one that I prefer. In the beginning, I did call them laws. However, I understand that in different universes, different realities, different types of things, that laws may be more subject to change, right? Because a law sounds rigid. It sounds like something outside of you, imposed on you, fixed, whether you like it or not. A law can feel like a prison. It's also because finiteness just doesn't feel right all of the time when it comes to the laws. I have heard people awakening saying that they absolutely do not believe in karma, that they don't believe karma exists beyond a certain scope, or that it exists at all. And I'm not going to deny that reality, right? Like, but then I also hear that karma is cause and effect, which is one of those principles. And then, Bashar talks about that karma is just action. And that's actually where this kind of dispute within me has started to arise. And I've been debating it within myself for quite some time now, is that like Bashar sits on 4 laws. And actually, that's going to be our next episode. So part of me is like, oh, why didn't we save it for this next episode? But it still applies here. And so we will definitely compare and contrast those 4 laws to the 7 Hermetics. But anyways, and So when it comes to a principle feels alive to me. A principle is a universal pattern that you can engage with. It doesn't dominate you, it invites you into alignment. A principle is a fundamental truth, idea, or standard that more or less guides an understanding of our behaviors, while a law is a rule created and enforced by something with consequences for violation, or a scientific statement that describes a recurring event in nature. It really just depends on where on the scale of polarity you are between finiteness and infinity. In my own personal perspective, that is. Now, I will say that I still navigate towards principle no matter what. And maybe that's that whole, like, back when I was a teenager, ODD, oppositional defiance disorder diagnosis. You know what I mean? Like, that laws, yeah, they do sound rigid. And the fact that there's violations for breaking them when source is unconditional. Source doesn't have a preference of which direction you necessarily create in, right? Now, there are, I'm sure, some laws of creation, and I think Bashar touches on those pretty well. So we'll get into that into the next episode. So, when I say the principle of mentalism or the principle of vibration, I'm not talking about rules you're forced to obey. I'm talking about living truths, truths that you can either ignore and you might suffer, or recognize and flow with, right? Like, obviously, I might not want to stand against the principle of vibration and think that things are solid because I know that I live in a hologram. But at one point in time, that was our belief system, right? And it served us for the time being that it was. And it doesn't mean that there's not a reality out there that doesn't have vibration in some sense, which would be super, super interesting and a whole nother rabbit hole to go down. So, principles remind us that we are co-creators. They're not commandments. They're mirrors of how reality already functions. And when you start working with them consciously, you're no longer at war with life. You're moving with the current instead of against it. Especially when we have so many triggers and, I think back to the ODD. How many other people can relate to the fact that they have so many triggers about laws and being told what to do, and the fact that there's always a consequence, and that kind of relates to fire and brimstone and Christianity and other religions and dogmas. So, yeah. My brain's like, we went there. I'm like, yeah, we went there. We always go there. So, that shift from law to principle is really subtle and powerful for myself. It takes Hermetics out of the realm of dogma and into the realm of participation. It also opens the door to infinity in ways that laws may have eventually or potentially do put us into boxes at times. Mind you, I'm also aware in my own thinking that some laws correlate to the structure of our reality and very existence, and those may not be as flexible. However, they also don't necessarily apply to us because we're already in this. They apply to us, but you know what I mean? Like, down here, that's not our job. That's the Mantis. That's, everything up there's job, and they're doing it just fine because we're still here. So just bring it back to infinity. And, like I said, we can go down this rabbit hole forever, quite literally. And then there's also the finiteness of it, where it ends with the laws or principles that feel good to you on your journey and help you in your own creational reality and being, right? Like karma, the concept of karma, we'll bring it back to that, served me very, very well through a portion of my spiritual journey. Now, that understanding of karma has expanded exponentially, right? Like my first original version of karma was suffering. It was, I had to pay debts for everybody. I had to clear other people's karma. I had to do this. I had to do that, right? Like I was this daughter of karma. And that was revealed to me in the psychosis. But now I see in retrospect how that dialogue and that storyline fed my suffering, fed my victimhood, fed my martyrdom, all of those things. And then, karma moved to cause and effect, understanding that every reaction has caused, a reaction has an action, so on and so forth. And how, like, if I do something that is dishonest or not in authenticity or not in integrity, that, it may have outcomes that I really, really don't appreciate and that I'm not, maybe proud of myself for, in a sense. And then now, you know what I mean? Like, karma is an action. And the negative part of it is, again, kind of that cause and effect. So it's still dissecting, it's still ever expanding for me. But yeah, that's where I'm at on that. Hopefully that helps somebody or more. So anyways, now that we have now that I've added in my personal explanatory perspective, and that is out of the way. And I actually feel good about it, thankfully. Not that it was super awkward or in an awkward space. Let's step into the Hermetic principles themselves and see where they align with Seth's teachings. And if you hear a low growl, my dog heard somebody outside, and so he's doing his own little thing. So we'll start with the principle of mentalism. Hermetic says, all is mind. The universe is mental. Seth's central teaching, you create your own reality, is the living demonstration of just that. It's not abstract philosophy. Seth grounded it in direct application. Your thoughts, beliefs, and imagination are not side effects, they are the architecture of your experience. Now, the principle of correspondence also aligns. As above, so below, as within, so without. Seth illustrated this in countless ways. For example, he often spoke about how your inner state, your beliefs, your emotions, your expectations, are reflected outward into the environment, the body, and your lived circumstances. If you hold a belief that the world is unsafe, you'll see evidence of danger everywhere you look. And if you believe your body is fragile, you'll create fragility in the body. That's direct correspondence. Seth didn't always use the poetic language of as above, so below. However, he taught the exact mechanism of it. The inner and outer mirror one another. Then we're going to bring in one more, right? We got a good trinity going today with the other trinity. So we got 3, 6. That's fun. Some Tesla numbers in there. So the principle of vibration. Hermetics says everything moves, everything vibrates, nothing rests. Seth explained this through probable realities and focus. He said that all versions of reality already exist as vibrational probabilities. You don't create from nothing. You align through your vibration with the reality that resonates with your beliefs and focus. That's not just an echo of Hermetics. It's almost an expansion of it. Hermetics gives us the foundation. Everything vibrates. Seth adds another layer. You are constantly choosing through your vibration which probable reality to step into. So the principle of vibration is the stage. And Seth is showing us how to move across it, right? Like think about timeline jumping. And this is where I also want to pause and say, look, we're not focusing on every Hermetic principle having a direct one-to-one parallel in the Seth material, and that's okay. That's actually why I call them principles and not laws, because these amazing teachings, whether it's Hermetics or Seth or the Mantis frequency, they all spring from the same universal truth, but they're not always packaged the same way. So, I mean, to throw it out there, the 10 commandments, like, right, in comparison to something else that might equal 3. I don't know why that popped into my head, but we're just running with it, right? 10 of something could equal 3 of this. That's what we're going with. Which also makes me kind of want to bring in the 10 commandments now and really like decipher that against Hermetic. Ooh, we're going to have a good episode with that. Thank you. There's contribution from the cosmos right there. So, anyways, where was I? I lost my space for a second. Okay, so Hermetics codified them into 7 principles for teaching. Seth didn't separate them that way. There was no need to. His teachings came about in a different way. He wove them together through lived examples and probability teachings. The Mantis don't separate them at all, really. They bring them as frequencies. They bring them as deep understandings for us to become aware of. So part of the beauty here is not trying to make them uniform. Instead, it's noticing how the same truths show up in different frameworks, which is really, really pivotal for what we're seeing in the state of the world and in humanity as a whole, right? The same truths showing up in different frameworks. All of us having the same truths inside of us, yet we seem so different on the outside that how could we ever be one, right? In some circumstances. But we are. We absolutely, infinitely, finitely are. That's a fun rabbit hole, right? So that's the harmony I want you to feel in this and all the episodes. It's not about lining up the puzzle pieces perfectly. It's about recognizing that whether you're studying Hermetic principles, reading Seth, or listening to Mantis transmissions, you're touching the same river of truth, just from different angles, different perspectives, different language, right? It's the outstretched spiral once again. Or maybe actually the compressed one still ever expanding and contracting. All of these teachings are the principle of as above, so below, because they were all at one point in time a new layer birthed into creation atop an older one, and so on and so forth. So, next, we're going to invite in the Mantis into this loving trinity. Well, they're already here, but you know what I mean? Like, we're going to talk about them next. So, the Mantis frequency is not about giving us more words or more philosophy. They don't come in with big books and lectures. They come in with pattern, with architecture, with frequency. They are the cosmic engineers, cosmic doctors, cosmic architects, right? Like very profound jobs that they have. And they are the ones who hold the scaffolding steady, while we, as humans, wobble our way through healing and remembering. Where Seth said, "You create your own reality," the Mantis remind us, yes, and we're holding the memory of your highest architecture so you can remember what alignment feels like. Like, in my head right now, I'm seeing that they hold the architecture of our progression, right? We talk about past lives and future lives, but everything runs congruent. So therefore, like when we expand and hit new levels, new spirals, new layers, whatever when we level up, because some people like to refer to it as a video game, the Mantis are holding all of that architecture for us to be able to do so. And where Hermetic says all is mind, the Mantis whisper, feel it in your field. Let the vibration shift before you demand the mind to control. For me personally, this is where things truly begin to crystallize. I could read Seth's words. I could study Hermetic principles. However, for me, it was the Mantis frequency that helped me embody them, that helped me feel the coherence of creation in my body. They hold the framework up to see how it's all built, like the studs and beams of a framed home before it's completely built. Or really even better, and quite honestly, I can see those studs and I can see the framing and I can see everything as it was before it existed in its whole because of the Mantis frequency, right? It's like having that x-ray vision to see through the walls after the structure is built. They guide me to remember, not just with my mind, but with my energy, with my whole entire sovereign being. And that is something words alone could never have done. So, as we step forward further into the architectures of our own realities, how do these streams weave together, right? Here's our 9, right? 3, 6, 9. Hi, Tesla. Thanks, Tesla. Think of it like a trinity, right? We've got 3 trinities now in this podcast episode. I'm loving it. All the symbology. So Seth equals the language of creation, and Hermetics equals the principles of creation. Mantis equals the frequency and architecture of creation. Together, these teachings show us not only that we create reality, but how creation unfolds through us in every breath, every thought, every vibration. And to me, in that order, quite specifically, right? Like the breath is what gives us life. It's what anchors us in. It's how we present here. It's how we are able to be here. The thought is then produced, and the thought then emits a vibration out. So let's take trauma, which is a perfect world-renowned example that we could apply this to. And I'm using trauma as the centerpiece here because trauma is the most common ground that we all can stand on. Every single one of us has been shaped by it in some way, some form. And when you see how Seth, Hermetics, and the Mantis each meet trauma, you begin to understand how creation itself works. Because trauma, when we're in it, kind of inhibits us from these alchemical processes. It inhibits us from being able to see that we are blocking our own doorways, that we have hidden the keys from ourselves, we've swallowed them whole, never to be seen again. Trauma is the doorway that shows us the architecture, right? A lot of us know now at this point, trauma activates gifts. Trauma activates deep remembrance if you allow it to. And once you understand it through the lens of trauma, you can apply it to anything: manifestation, healing, relationships, abundance, and so on. Trauma is the pivot point where these teachings prove themselves alive. So we're going to start with Seth. Sorry. We're going to start with Seth. I get a little excited. Seth said, you create your own reality. And it's not a metaphor. I guess I'm getting a little more comfortable behind the mic. So, you create your own reality is not a metaphor. It's the mechanics of existence. And I have to be careful. I'm just going to take a side note for a second. I have to be careful because like the first, right? Afterwards, like I was like, okay, I'll just be my natural self, right? And then right after that, the thought of, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that. So then it happened a second time on accident to like kind of work me through that and not be so afraid. So that's what just happened in my brain. Again, Seth said, you create your own reality. And it's not a metaphor. It's the mechanics of existence. Every belief you repeat is not just a private thought floating in your head. It's a command to the universe. Every quiet whisper of, I am unworthy, rearranges the probabilities of your life in a negative context that I'm very, very sure you don't want to go in that direction. Every fearful expectation primes your environment to match it, right? Like, what is it, that self-fulfilling prophecy stuff? And then we kind of like, oh, see, I told you nothing good ever happens, right? Like reaffirming. No. Nothing good happens because you don't believe that anything good would happen, and you need to switch it up, right? Your world bends itself around the axis of what you believe is possible, and only what you believe is possible. And if you allow anybody else to put some yucky beliefs into you, it is your responsibility to get them out. So, nobody else's fault. This is why boundaries are healthy, and even just little things of like, hey, like, I appreciate it, but I just don't want to hear the negativity right now. Like, I'm maybe too vulnerable in this moment. Right? Like I have to say that sometimes to people. Sometimes people that I love are in a more negative state of mind than I am. And I've had to have a very serious conversation with someone about, and this was just recently, like, I lived in negativity. I lived in pain and victimhood and suffering and violence and addiction and all of these things, trauma, all of it. And it took me so long to reprogram my mind to where I don't want to respond in a negative way. I don't enjoy it. And so when I speak something, even if they're joking, you know what I mean? Like, now I also have to give my fine line of like knowing their personality and when they are joking and things like that. But when I say 10 different things and 10 different times I get a negative response, I have to put those boundaries up and be very honest that I am vulnerable in that regard sometimes, because that person is impactful in my life. They are healthy for me in a magnitude of ways. And I'm healthy for them in a magnitude of ways. But we both have things that we're working on, right? And that's just one of those. So, Seth wasn't giving us positive thinking. He was handing us the keys to the creative engine we're all driving, whether we admit it or not. Because remember, source doesn't care which direction you create it, right? So it's up to you to understand how you create. Now, look at Hermetics. The principle of correspondence, as within, so without, as above, so below. This isn't just alchemical, poetic, activating text. It is exact. What you refuse to face within yourself will become the face you meet outside of yourself. Trauma unhealed inside will be trauma reflected back outside. Pain echoes pain. This is why the same partners, the same jobs, the same betrayals keep cycling through your life. It's the mirror of your inner state. And it may be all you ever knew. And it's not necessarily, you're responsible for it. Let me put it that way. And I don't mean that in like a non-compassionate way, because I don't want to say it's not your fault, because we chose, when we start to really take responsibility and understand, like, I have the power. I am a creatrix. I am a sovereign being that can create anything that I want, right? Like, when we become conscious of that, sometimes we shame ourselves and degrade ourselves and think, holy shit, how did I create all that? I would have never created all that. It's not my fault. Da 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 da. Like, like I said earlier in the podcast episode, it's a rough one to get through. It's a hard pill to swallow. Yet that pill is full of nothing but blossoms and grounding and nurturing and nurturance. Just think of it like, swallow it and think of it like a capsule expanding and grounding you deeper into Mother Earth, into the ancient wisdom that we are, right? How amazing is it that we are these humans getting to tap into this ancient wisdom and knowledge and anchor it in, getting it to experience so vividly and so brightly for some of the first time and God knows how long. That's the visual that I just had. So, the moment that you shift the vibration even slightly, baby steps, right? Like, well, maybe I'm worthy. Maybe I could do that. Maybe I could try, right? Or I don't want to be like this anymore. The reflection must change, and it will change. Sometimes it takes time. I've seen some things take me a lot slower in progression and other layers much faster. Healing is not just for your comfort. It is for, ultimately, your creation. It is for creating, downloading, integrating the ascension that we are all striving for. It is literally for us to bring in world peace. It is the recalibration of reality itself. And every time you choose a different thought, a different lifestyle, a different frequency, you shatter the old mirror and demand a new reflection. That is Hermetics alive in you. And I also want to take the time to say that honesty without compassion is brutality. So, boundaries are good. Don't need to harm anybody else in invoking them, okay? Because I've done it. I'm like when I first started boundaries, I did it. I harmed other people because, and you're like, well, boundaries can't harm anybody. No, the way that you speak them, the way that you behave about them, yes. So just being mindful, right? Like being mindful. And I really love the quote, honesty without compassion is brutality. So, and trying to get anybody else to see where you are when they're not ready yet, like that's just banging your head against a wall over and over again, right? Maybe even expecting the other person to bleed. I don't know. So now, and then the Mantis, right? Ooh, I love them so much. I'm not attached. You're attached. No, I'm just kidding. I always like check myself, like, damn it, like, don't have favoritism, but I do. But you know what I mean? They're a part of me, and I love me now. And that's a miracle and a blessing. And that's not something I could have said. Not even, maybe a short distance ago, maybe even a year ago. No, I wouldn't have said it a year ago. That's for sure. So if you want to just take a moment and really like feel into like how you feel about yourself, so you can like anchor this in as a marker. So if you don't love yourself yet, or if you only love a portion of yourself, that's okay. Like, you're here and you're going to get there, wherever that is for you. So, the Mantis, they are the architects of remembrance. They don't erase the storm of trauma, at least not per se. I believe that sometime in my future, there will be times that I don't have dreams like I had this morning upon waking, right? I know that me saying like that they're not going to erase them is kind of a finite statement, and I'm not for finite statements. And I also know, this has been fun lately, is me voicing something I've known for a long time, but like finally putting words to it, is like the moment that, and this is kind of sidetracking, so I apologize, but also it really kind of flows in the moment, that the moment I make a finite statement, it opens the door to the infinite. And the moment that I make an infinite statement, it opens the door to the finiteness. So hopefully that helps you in your creating, in your healing, and all of that. So they hold the scaffolding steady while you rebuild. And they allow you to rewrite your past from the victimhood and the suffering and everything that we thought that we knew into something so sovereign, so delightful, delectable, delicate, and divine. And those are their words that they are feeding me right now, because this is definitely not anything I have in my notes at the moment or in my script, whatever we want to call it. When you collapse, when you fragment, when you forget, they hum the original code back into your cells, and they remind your body what coherence feels like. They remind your nervous system that chaos is not your natural state. It's like hearing a song that you used to know, and suddenly your whole being leans toward it because it remembers the melody. That's what the Mantis do. They stabilize the field of wholeness around you so you have something to return to, even when you feel like you're drowning. They don't live your life for you, and they don't bypass the lesson. They simply hold the memory of your wholeness so you can find your way back home. In the midst of all of it, the brokenness, the damage, the trauma, the fragmented, every part of you feeling like it's not a part of you at all, not being able to identify yourself, not being able to own your body or own your mind, or when you look at yourself, like I've struggled with all of this. And for years. And yet they hold in place my wholeness so I can pick those pieces up and I can put them back together until I can see myself whole in my body, anchored in once again. So when we talk about trauma, manifestation, or healing, it's all the same architecture. Seth reminds us your thoughts are not sealed away inside your head. They are blueprints handed directly to existence. And every belief sets vibration into motion. Every expectation ripples outward. Your thoughts are architects of creation, destruction, death, rebirth, and transformation, and so on and so on and so on. And reality listens to them all. Hermetics reminds you that reality is a mirror, that what you hold inside will always be reflected outside. If you carry unworthiness, the world will echo it back as rejection, as scarcity, as betrayal. And if you carry fear, you will find it staring at you in the faces you meet and the circumstances you walk through. And I promise you that fear against fear is never an enjoyable outcome, at least not for my nervous system. The outer world cannot help but show you the vibration that you are radiating within. And this is not punishment. It is precision. It is a lesson. It is a taught. It is alchemy. The mirror exists to bring you back to yourself, to make the unseen visible, to call you into healing, to call you into becoming your own creatrix. When you shift even one layer of your inner vibration, the reflection must respond. The mirror has no choice but to change. This is the Hermetic key. Reality is not fixed. It is responsive to your inner state always. And if you don't believe me, go sit in front of a mirror and change your smile from happy to sad, right? The moment that changes is the moment that everything else changes. And you can watch that happen in the mirror. That's what it's like all around us. We just don't have that tangible, physical evidence of it facing us, like in our faces. Like, but each one is a mirror being held up by ourselves, not necessarily even by the other person, although that's probably part of the agreement. Like, we'll get down that road another time. That's a whole paradox and something fun to look at. The mantis reminds you that you are not alone in this rebuild of yourself. The scaffolding of coherence is always humming for you, waiting for you to remember. When your nervous system is in chaos, when trauma has scrambled your inner architecture, they hold steady the blueprint of wholeness. They don't interfere with your free will, and they don't walk the path for you, but they sing the song of your original design into your field so you have something to lean into as you heal. Their frequency is the reminder that you were never the chaos, never the fracture, never the wound. You were always the one holding the possibility of coherence. And when you collapse, when you fragment, when you feel like you've forgotten who you are, the mantis keep humming the pattern of your wholeness until you can recognize it once again. This is the architecture of reality. Not rigid, not linear, alive, responsive, exacerbated through you in every moment. And that is the word of the podcast episode, because that definitely kept coming up, especially through this segment. They were like, exacerbate this part. So I was like, all right, we're going all in. So before we close, I want to leave you with a small practice that weaves all of this together. Think of a belief that you're carrying right now, a belief about yourself, your health, your relationships, your finances. Usually your higher self is pretty good about pinpoint which one they want you to think of. So it should be in your head. Notice how it feels in your body. Does it feel heavy? Does it feel expansive? What about contracted? Does it feel alive? Does it feel controlling, fearful, negative, positive? Now, ask yourself, if I shift this thought, what probability line am I stepping into? And we don't just want to shift it to the opposite, right? Like if you're in an expansive thought, one that feels really, really good, let's take that another step further. Let's put maybe the thought of the next action into that. But if you're in one that feels heavy and contracted and controlling, we want to shift that into one that feels expansive, one that feels nurturing and nourishing, right? Because here's what's powerful about this. Every time you pause and choose to look at your belief differently, you're engaging your brain's neuroplasticity. You're literally teaching your brain new pathways, rewiring the grooves where trauma and old patterns once lived. This isn't just mental, it's physical. Neurons fire differently. New connections are made, and your nervous system begins to recognize new possibilities. And since you are a spiritual world inside a spiritual world, the neuroplasticity and the neurons and whatever else and the patterns and the pathways that you create will reflect themselves out in the cosmos of the spiritual world that we live on and create more connection within all of us, because that's how it works, right? Building new highways within inside yourself to communicate in a better way builds new highways and new grids for humanity and the cosmos and all of the galactic beings and the Federation and the stars and everybody to communicate on a higher level. It threads us all closer together. That's the miracle of this work. The moment you shift within, you're not only changing your inner landscape, you're also reshaping the way your brain operates and the way the world reflects back to you. Neuroplasticity is the science behind the Hermetic principle, the Seth teaching, and the Mantis reminder. It's your body saying, yes, I can change. Yes, I can create. Yes, I can remember. Yes, I can become new. And so here's the Mantis transmission that wants to close this episode. Your reality is not fixed. It is not a sentence. It is a canvas. Every thought you allow through your field is a brushstroke. Every vibration is a color. Every belief is a pattern. We do not paint for you. We hold the memory of your wholeness so that you can remember your artistry. You are the artist, the canvas, and the act of creation itself. Remember this, and you will remember us. Take a deep breath with me and let it all settle into your cells. It's a beautiful way to close, I think, the Mantis frequency. I think all the frequencies that contribute to where we are today. Thank you for being here with me on a Spiritual World podcast. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone you love, subscribe and save it so you can come back to these teachings anytime. Go down your own rabbit holes and enjoy it. And stay tuned, because in the next episode, we're going to dive deeper into this identification of parallels with the infamous Bashar. And until then, remember, your reality is alive and you are its architect. Or like I like to say, creatrix. Don't forget, there are pairing meditations, and I've kind of just been recording and getting them out there as much as I can. So just head over to the Meditative State of Being playlist on the YouTube channel and you'll be able to pick. You can put in Mantis. It should come up whether it's in the title or in the description, or you can find other stuff. There's a lot of helpful videos and listenings, and I'd love it if you subscribed and enjoyed them ultimately and found them very helpful. It's a great way to support this work, and it's quite honestly a blessing to me. Namaste and many blessings on your way.